Colleen Penderville for the South constituency, and Brave Smith for Dublin. So I'm not going to go into too much detail with the individual candidates, because we want to give them the opportunity to speak on what their topic is going to be and what they're going to be running on. So first of all, I'm going to be introducing Brian O'Boyle for the Midlands Water constituency.
Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, so one of the overarching themes of the campaign is that Europe has enormous potential, but as it's currently set up, it often frustrates that potential, and I'm going to look at that around the climate crisis. So, if you think about the potential, one of the really impressive things is that over the last 30 years, international collaboration amongst thousands of scientists have really shown the danger of the perils we're in. We can't really say with any seriousness that we don't know about the climate crisis. So the climate crisis is very real, and we know and we understand it better now than we ever did. And yet, although there's a lot of climate theatre from the mainstream politicians, and they give lip service to it every year, what's happening is every single year we're told we have one less chance to take it seriously, and every year emissions go up. So for us, there's a sort of a climate spectacle going on, and the reason for it is because what the scientists have shown us is that 71% of all emissions come from about 100 corporations. And if you drill in a bit more, a third of all emissions come from just 20 global corporations. And those 20 global corporations are so embedded in the logic of capitalism that we are left with, as I say, governments that sit on their hands, that protect the interests of big business, and then that try to sort of pretend they're doing something serious by either blaming individual people and saying you have to watch your own carbon footprint, or by taxing people. And if any serious journalist is looking at what's happening, we would argue that that's really counterproductive. I'm talking to small farmers in my campaign, for example, and a lot of them are being alienated by the constant sense that they're being asked to shoulder the burden. So they can see that the big corporations, the big agri firms, the big airline industry, the oil and gas companies, they're really not being asked to pay very much. And it's the small and medium farmers. And so what you're getting is increasingly people are becoming either cynical or angry, and they're seeing it as a kind of a trade-off. Our current economic security or our climate commitments, and we think that's a disaster, right? So that's one of the things that we're looking at. And so what do we say on the issue? Well, the first thing is we trust the science. I mean, science is absolutely definitive, but we don't trust the mainstream politicians. And so I would say a radical voice, a radical MEP has two things to do. Number one, we have to tell the truth about the climate crisis, and it's absolutely intrinsically linked to a model of capitalism that produces for profit. That's absolutely obvious to anyone who thinks about it today, right? And so we will be not afraid to take on the corporate power. That is ultimately a major block, is ultimately the reason why, even though since the 1990s we've known that we have to cut emissions, we've had more emissions since 1990 than we ever had in all of human history before 1990. So they're not serious about climate change, and we are. And beyond that, you have to be able to give concrete solutions to people. And so we've five here. There are many more in our manifesto, but I'll give you five quick ones and then I'll finish. So one is, you have to listen to small and medium farmers. That's the first thing you have to do. You have to make sure that they get a sense that they can have economic security as we then have a just transition. They want to farm the land, they want to be stewards, but they have to have economic security. So that's one. Free public transport. There are many cities now across Europe that are going for a free public transport model. We still don't. We're miles behind on that, and it's a technical issue that would help particularly younger people to see that it's a serious issue. Because it's also about signalling that they're going to do it. The data centres that are so central to Irish capitalism now are guzzling up to a third of all of our electricity. We would ban them. They would have to be banned on the basis of a cost benefit of the common good, and at the moment the common good is not served by the private good of small international companies that are basically hijacking our whole grid. So they would have to be banned. So there's a few things to ban. Another thing that we would like to ban is the kind of frivolous lifestyles of the really rich people who have private jets. I was reading a newspaper article this morning about some guy who got on a plane in New York and flew to London for one day and then flew home again. It's like, that's deeply antisocial behaviour, and that should be called out. So we think, we're not always for banning things, but there are certain things that we think have to be banned. And then you also have to make sure that you then take the profits of big business and you use those for a just transition. And so Europe is where you can do that. Europe is the centre of what's possible. You can't do any of those things really effectively in one country. So we're pro-Europe, but we need a radical change in Europe, and that's one of the big things we want to get across in the campaign.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you. Keane, I guess you're going to do the next video.
Yeah, key thing that I want to talk about is Palestine. I think it's surreal, to be honest with you, that this is not featuring in the mainstream media debate around this election. The reality is that there is a genocide taking place on the doorstep of Europe right now, with using European arms, using European money to murder, maim and kill ordinary Palestinians. The vast majority of people in Ireland are opposed to this, and the EU is on the wrong side of it. It should be a major feature in this debate. Every candidate should be asked, do they support an arms embargo and to stop EU weapons going to arming Israel? 1/3 of the bombs, 1/3 of the weapons that Israel is using are coming from the European Union countries. An arms embargo across Europe would therefore have a dramatic impact on cutting off Israel from their weapons. Every candidate should be asked to support that. Every candidate should be asked if they would oppose the re-election of Ursula von der Leyen. It's shameful to see Fine Gael candidates out saying that they will support Ursula von der Leyen, who has been a cheerleader for genocide. But also, every candidate should be being asked in these debates if they would support boycott, divestment and sanctions on Israel. We need to cut off not just their weapons, their flow of weapons and funding, kick them out of the Horizon Europe, where they're getting, where Israeli military companies get funding from EU taxpayers.